Well, hello, howdy, and welcome back to the final instalment in our series Mixing a Country Song. Here at Twangmeister Studios, I'm Dan Wesley, and this is brought to you as ever by Mixed by the Twangmeister. If you would like to have your songs mixed by the Twangmeister, please get in touch. All the details below. I hope you've been with us all the way through this journey. This is the final part of the mixing process, to give you a kind of an idea of how things are done here. Obviously, it's a different process depending on the style of music, but in this particular song, I hope we've given you a good idea of how things work, certainly, or how I work anyway. Up to now, what have we done? We've taken you through the mixing process on, starting of course, way back when, it seems an age ago now, doesn't it, with all our drums, all the drum processing that we did, through to the bass, the acoustic instruments, acoustic guitar, dobro, electric guitars, piano, fiddle, and all the vocal stuff that happened in the last episode. All of the stuff that we did there on these tracks was designed to make them all sound exactly how we want them to hopefully blend together nicely. But in this final part of the mixing process, what we need to do is now balance everything and get everything to sit nicely and have its little moments where it shines, and this requires automation. So we need to move things up and down at various points of the song, particularly with a genre like this and an arrangement like this. A reminder for those of you that maybe have just joined us, if you have only just joined us, then please go and check out the other videos. The song in question is by an artist called David Broadley. David is originally from New Zealand. He spent a good chunk of years over here in the UK, and during that time recorded a couple of albums here, and this particular song, Somebody Stop Me, comes from the second of those albums, written by another guy here in Grimsby called Steve Blythin. And I think you'll agree, some great musicianship going on here, a great arrangement, and a really good, fun, up-tempo, modern country song. Okay, that's all that out of the way. So, what is going on today? Well, like I say, we've been looking at all the tracks so far, and we've been getting them all to sound nice. But right now, we're going to be concentrating on the buses. And this is kind of showing you my workflow. So over here, all these tracks here with the black fader caps, those are our tracks, and a good number of them, as you can see. And over in this section, all of these with the blue caps, these are our buses. So I'm just going to drag this out so that we can see all of our buses, so that you can see the full, the whole workflow and the way this mix is set up, because there's a little bit more going on than we've shown you hitherto. So there's a drum for each. There's a drum. Is there a drum? Yes, there's quite a few drums, but there's a bus, is what I meant to say, for each instrument. However many tracks there are of those instruments in the track section, they all end up on their own bus. So we have a drums bus here, bass, acoustic guitar, dobro, electric, piano, fiddle. There's an iVerb there, which is an instrument with reverb, which you may remember I set up that we can send various amounts of the instruments to if we feel they need them. And then there's a couple of vocal buses, the lead vocal bus and the background vocal bus, and of course all the lead vocal tracks, and there are 8 of them here. One, the actual vocal itself, various parallel processes, an aux track and another parallel compressor, etc., and they all end up here on this vocal bus. All the backing vocal tracks end up on this bus here. So what do we have here? We have what's that, about 10 buses, is it, of instruments? 1, 2, 3, 4, blah, blah, blah. Yep. Okay, and then we have our master section, and I think I showed you this early on in the process of all the processing that is going on over here. So let's have a look at this just for a moment, show you where things are going. Right. Have a look at these little labels here. This tells you where I am sending each one of these buses. You will see that the drums go directly to the mix bus, but nothing else goes directly to the mix bus. No, all of our instruments go to a bus called band. The vocals go to a bus called musical. What is that all about? Well, let me just give you a quick explanation of what this is all about and why I've done it in this way. I want to give a bit of extra processing, a bit of extra parallel compression on all my instruments. Now, you'll notice over here I have these two tracks at the very end here called P bus L and P bus right, parallel buses left and right, and they each have on them a trusty 1176 compressor. Okay, one for the left, one for the right, and they are being sent to from this musical bus. Right, okay, with me so far. The musical bus is going to the mix bus, but it has sends, and I suppose to prove what I'm saying, I need to show you the sends, don't I? Let's have a look. The musical bus, why do I call it musical? Because it's everything melodic, I think. I could call it a melodic bus, really. Basically, everything that isn't drums, whereas the band bus is everything that isn't drums or vocals. Okay? That makes no sense either, does it? Because surely the drummer's part of the band. Anyway, don't get me started on this. You're just trying to confuse matters. So, all my instruments go to the band bus, which then, as you can see, goes to the musical bus, the melodic bus, if you like. The vocals are going straight to that bus as well. So this bus, the musical bus, has everything except drums, and it has a couple of sends. One to the parallel bus left and right, which is parallel compression, which I've shown you. 1176 is on there, one for the left and one for the right, and we'll get into a little bit of how that affects the sound in a little while. So they send here to these buses, but they go to the mix bus, and the mix bus is this one here, which already has the drums, because the drums are going directly to the mix bus. Now have a look on the mix bus. There's no processing on the mix bus. What's that all about? No, all the processing happens on this one called master. The mix bus goes to the master. Okay, now why have we done it like this? Why have I not just put it all on this one? Why have I added an extra bus? Well, all of these plugins that I have on my master have all been set and tweaked over the years to do certain jobs, and they work best, optimally, shall we say, if they're getting the right level of signal. Now, this is why I have an intermediary bus before here, because whatever levels, everything ends up coming here to this mix bus, and then I can, with this fader, control how hot that signal is. I can set it to be exactly how I want it, so that I know that it hits these processes on the master bus correctly. So let me just put these back to 0. We'll see a little bit of that as we go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hit play now. We are at the stage that we were at the end of the last video where we'd finished all the vocals. So we've got things sounding more or less how we want them. The balance has not been tweaked yet, but let's have a look at what's going on over here when I hit play. Okay.
When I first saw her sitting there, I liked the way she looked, like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth.
Okay, so what are we seeing here? We are seeing the band bus. Then that looks like the hottest one at the moment, doesn't it? Hot property, the band bus. All the instruments, basically, apart from the drums. And then they are coming here. Now, I've got this turned down quite a bit. This is the musical bus, which basically is everything that isn't drums. So let me grab hold of that fader. Before we go any further, let me show you. It just so happens, what a coincidence, how many of these particular buses do we have here? Well, we have a good number of them, and I have them brought up here on my faders right here. It just so happens there are 16 of them, and I have 16 faders, which is handy for this process because this is what I grab. We're kind of focusing on the buses and kind of ignoring the tracks now. If we feel that any internal balances among the tracks still need tweaking, we can go back and tweak them. But for the most part, we are going to be working on these buses. So this fader here is my musical bus. So let me play again and we'll turn this down.
Now 6 months down.
Okay, so there's proof that that is everything that isn't drums. Let me solo the band bus. Okay, see, everything that isn't drums or vocals. Are you with me so far? I know, this is complex stuff. So why, if I want to process all the melodic elements with a bit of extra compression, why did I feel the need to have a separate band bus? Why not send all of the instruments and the vocals to this one? Why have yet another thing there? Good question. It's nice to be able to pull down the band, but not your vocals at times. It might be that I feel I've got the mix going really nicely, but my vocals might be, are they a little bit too quiet? I could just a little touch, pull down the band bus with one fader, rather than having to go through, oh, I just need to turn the guitar down a bit and the piano down a bit, you know, that kind of thing. This gives me more freedom, flexibility, and instant control. Yeah? Happy with that? I thought you would be. Okay, so this is why we've got things going on. Now you're thinking, now this looks really low. Let's unsolo things again and watch these levels again.
Somebody stop me. Oh, what?
Now I talked about hitting my master section and all the processing at the right level, and I've learnt over the years with the tweaks that I have set up on here that I want the mix bus to be just poking into the orange.
Oh, what have I done? I couldn't see the wood for the trees.
So at the moment it's not quite getting in there, so we can actually raise this up a little bit more to get what we want. I'll just give you a quick refresher without going into loads of great detail of what's going on here on the mix bus. We have a bus compressor, which is our API 2500. We have another stereo, or should I say multi-mono compressor, because it's unlinked there with our Fairchild. We then have a Pultec with a little bit of a smiley face, a bit of top and a bit of bottom on there. We have, next in line, we have this. Now this can be in or out depending on what I feel is necessary. This is our linear phase equalizer, and as you can see I've done a few little tweaks here, mostly in the sort of the bottom area, the lower register, and this often gets tweaked whilst referencing the reference track. Now, I've not mentioned the reference track so far. A reference track is a commercial mix that we really like that sounds similar to what we are working on. Same sort of genre, same sort of instrumentation, the singers singing in a similar register, all that kind of thing. And we know that that sounds really great. And if we can just compare our mix with that, and we can make our little fine adjustments here and there to get ourselves as close as possible. And these are a few tweaks that I've done listening to the reference. Now, unfortunately, let me show you. Go right back to the very first track. The very first track here, which you have not heard, you can see is muted there, is our reference track. And shall we, tell you what I'll do, I'll tell you what it is. Trouble is, I can't play it for you. No, I can't play it for you because YouTube has a bit of a thing about you playing commercially available music. It can get my videos pulled down off YouTube, so I can't play that for you, but bear in mind that I am referencing that at various points during the mixing process, and certainly at this point. It's a song, what did we use? I think we used a song by Josh Turner. Check him out. Country singer with a similar register in his vocal to David, a sort of baritone singer. And one of his songs I thought had, yep, that's got the right kind of balance of instruments and what have you. We'll make regular reference to that to show that we're getting the tone and balance of our mix right. So, yes, that's what that's all about. Next in line, we have a little bit of stereo widening, only a very slight touch because we don't want to get crazy with this. And then, of course, our NLS. And you remember we looked at this earlier on and we saw that we can control each instrument group because there's an NLS non-linear summer on each of the audio tracks and we can kind of control and choose the different flavors all from here, as well as actually the flavor of this bus itself. And then we have our limiter, just to make sure that we're not going over. Now, I'm not using a limiter for getting full volume here. This is not what this is about. That happens during the mastering process. We're not looking to be banging our mix up to 0 with this. I just want to just catch the odd peaks, and so you'll see that we've got very little push going on, and I've actually set the the ceiling to minus 2.4 there. But we're trying not to get too much close to that. That's just there for safety's sake. Like I say, we're not pushing that at all. And then a couple of analyzers here. We have this, the Voxengo Span, which is our frequency analyzer. And also for our level here, we have this lovely little VUMT to get the level that we want to be achieving. Those kind of things are often more critical in the mastering stage, but they're there to be helpful during this process. So let's get back to what we were doing. A reminder, everything's coming here, the drums going straight to the mix bus, instruments going to the band, which then go to the musical where they are joined by the vocals. We get some parallel compression on these 2 tracks here. So let me show you what these do. Let's just drag them down for now and then bring them in. So this is without our parallel compression.
I don't want no sympathy, it's all my fault, but somebody stop me, please.
They're great because what they do is they make the sound fuller, I think, is one way of describing it. Really nice. A very important part of the process. So because we're going to be concentrating on our buses, what I am going to do is let's widen them all and then we can give them a total focus. Widen all strips. So, and then if I drag this out here, we will see just our buses. Okay, this over here is the main output. We don't need to see this, the main output to our interface, if you like. So here's a good view. We've got all the buses nicely in view, and they are all down here for me to control. So what are we going to do? Before we start this automation process, we are going to get a basic balance. I'm going to leave all these buses alone, but all my audio tracks, audio buses, instruments, vocals, etc. I'm going to pull them all down and we're going to start from scratch to build up the sort of balance that we want. Because at the moment we've been focusing on certain instruments, making them sound nice, and often when you do that you end up that instrument's the loudest thing there. So let's start playing. Let's go back to the beginning and starting off with the drums, let's bring them all up to get them at the levels that we want. So concentrate first of all on, we can get rid of those. In fact, we could also get rid of the sends. Let's just clean things up as much as possible, give ourselves as little clutter. So starting off, watch the drums. I want to be getting the drums, and I know this from experience, to be hitting around -6 dB. So let's do that, shall we? And bring this fader up. So this number here represents the position of our fader. This number here shows you the peak value of the audio. You might remember that we have a compressor on our drums bus, API 2500. Barely even moving, it just does things at the right points when things get a bit over the top. So we're hitting around -6 there on our fade. That's great. I like that as my starting point, and then I'm going to start bringing things in. So we'll bring in the bass. In fact, before I bring the rest of the instruments in, I'm just going to have the bass and the acoustic guitar in, and then I'm going to go and bring the vocals in.
Order my oysters southern fried.
And you'll notice that when there's very little else in, suddenly you're thinking, hang on a minute, we've got a bit too much effects going on there on those vocals. Well, yes, but it's not what they sound like without everything else in that matters, it's what they sound like with everything else in. So let's get the level of the vocals right before we start bringing in the other instruments.
Somebody stop me, oh, what have I done? I couldn't see the wood for the trees. I don't want no sympathy, it's all my fault, but somebody stop me, please. Somebody stop me, oh, what have I done? I couldn't see the wood for the trees. I don't want no sympathy, it's all my fault, but somebody stop me, please. Somebody stop me, please.
Okay, we're roughly close to where we want to be. Let's start from the top. From the top. 4, 5, 6.
When I first saw her sitting there, I liked the way she looked, like butter a wooden mound in her mouth. There's only so much that a man...
Okay, so we're in the right kind of area, and if you're watching the levels over here, we're hitting more or less where we want to be hitting. So we've got a rough balance going, but that's not going to be good enough in the long run. There are things we need to do. Now then, before we go any further, going to address a couple of questions. Somebody asked me, do I always mix in headphones? And the answer, of course, to that is no, I don't mix in headphones at all. I will put them on several times during the process to check things, but generally I am mixing on my monitors. The reason that I have been in headphones for the entirety of this process is purely for the purpose of recording this video. My voice is being picked up by a microphone over here. Hello, which is a good 2 foot away from my face, but only a few inches away from my left monitor. So if I had the speakers on during this process, the microphone would be picking up a lot of the speaker sound, which would then mess around with the sound of the mix, and you wouldn't be hearing what you should be hearing, if you know what I mean. Also, we'd probably get some howling feedback as well. Why, you might ask, do I not have a microphone right in front of my face. Surely that would make a nicer sound, but yes. But you see, if I did that, I'd have to have the microphone over here, and it would then be blocking the view of my control surface from above. So this is the reason I'm doing this, which is there's a bit more ambient sound on my microphone than there might be if I was more closer mic'd. That explains why I don't have my speakers on and I'm mixing in headphones during this process. Okay, that's that out of the way. Somebody also said, do I ever mix in mono? And the answer is, well, no, I don't mix in mono, but I will reference in mono regularly by pressing the mono switch over here on my big knob. And yes, I have a big knob, but you already knew that because you can see it's over here, look. And I can do that during the rest of this process. However, if I press the mono button over here on my big knob, you won't hear the result of that because you're not hearing audio coming from that. You're hearing audio directly from my DAW itself. So instead, and I don't normally do this because I have a physical control, I can come straight to my master bus here and hit this button. That will turn it into mono. So we'll do that during the course of this video, just so that we can hear how things sound, how the mono compatibility is. Okay, right, without further ado, let's crack on with this. So we have our rough balance. Now you might be asking, how come this mix now isn't done? Why are we spending a final video on automation? Is it necessary? Well, it is absolutely necessary, and I shall explain why, particularly in this genre. It's important in any style of music because there are parts of any song, any type of music, where you need to feature things louder or quieter than in other parts of the song. But in this particular style, in country music, it's absolutely essential that we get the automation right because you've heard already during the process, we've got some great musicianship going on here. Really nice licks on the guitars and lovely fills here and there on all kinds of instruments. And they need to be heard. That great musicianship has to be heard. For example, the piano plays a very important role in the second verse. It's the main fill instrument he's doing twiddly bits. In the first verse, of course, it's the fiddle. The dobro needs to be kind of a general background instrument during the choruses, but then it needs to come up for those important little things that he does, those important little slides here and there, etc., etc. Very important, and this is an essential part of this kind of music. I was producing an album for another artist, same style of music, once again, same great musicianship on the tracks, recently. And this particular artist, we'd got 7 songs into the album. This was going to be a 10-track album. And this particular artist had been coming for a couple of years, as and when they had the funds or they had the next song to do. And like I say, we were 7 songs into this 10-song album. And I didn't hear anything from this particular artist for a couple of months. And then they rang up and said that they had a backer come in. I don't exactly know what all the details were, but someone who was going to promote this artist and back them, provide all the funds for the rest of the production of the album, plus all the mixing, etc., etc. But the stipulation of this person providing the funds was that the artist went to finish the album at the studio of their choosing with the mix engineer of their choosing. So the last 3 tracks of the album were taken kind of out of my hands, and all the mixing, it was taken somewhere else. And of course they bit this person's hand off, obviously, because you are going to, aren't you, if somebody said they're going to pay for everything. So they went away to this other sort of kind of big name studio, got this big name mix engineer in, and by all accounts had a pretty terrible time. But that's not the main part of the story. What the main part of the story is that I said to the artist, right, before you go to mastering, please send me the mixes that this guy's done so I can hear them and check that everything's fine. And so they did that. They sent me the stuff just 36 hours before they were going to mastering. And I heard these mixes and I had to make a very quick panicked phone call, or was it an email, something. The mixes were absolutely dreadful. In terms of the balance, of the tone of the tracks, they were all fine. The vocal sounded fine, the drums and the bass, this guy obviously knew what he was doing, but all the instruments were pretty much set at one level and they never moved. And don't forget, these were tracks that I was intimately familiar with. I knew where all those nice licks were on all the different instruments. I knew it, and it was amazing. I was listening to these tracks and it was like, where's that great fiddle part? Where's that really good steel guitar part? I can barely hear it in the background. It completely failed to spot what was important in these tracks. And so, like I say, a panicked phone call, quick, cancel your mastering, we've got to remix these. So they brought them back here and we remixed them, and all was well in the end. But it was a lesson in how essential it is that you know what you're doing with this stuff and you know where to push things up here and there. So that is what we're doing today. We are looking for the important, nice little touches of all these instruments and making sure they appear in the right places. So let's get to it, shall we? We have our general balance, which sounds like this.
That a man can take. The only thing that hasn't changed is my pride.
And just because I've set various things, effects and levels of sends, it doesn't mean I'm not going to tweak them from this point on. Of course, I will if I hear something that thinks, yes, there's a little bit too much reverb on that, or there's a little bit... I will go back and tweak things that we've done previously, because that's also part of this final stage of the process. But what I want to do, first of all, is sort out the main instruments. Now then, 3 of these tracks are going to be static. The drums, the bass and the rhythm acoustic guitar, I'm happy to set and forget those, get them to a level where we want them. We don't need to automate them. Let's make sure that they are at the right level. But the other instruments, and that's what we're going to concentrate on right now, our electric guitar, piano, fiddle and the dobro, all will need some attention. So how are we going to deal with this? What I'm going to do is, if we come back over to this view, you can see we have all our tracks here. Now then, what we also have, if we open this up, is we can see all of our buses. Now they're incredibly zoomed in, so we're not seeing very many of them, but look, these under this line are our buses. And I want to do some automation on the buses. So I'm not automating the tracks, I'm automating the buses. And for now, we're going to concentrate on these 4 instruments: the dobro, the electric, the piano and the fiddle. And for the purpose of this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to deal with them 2 at a time. So what I will do at this stage is I will have another listen through the mix and I will play with the level of these 2 particular instruments. So the dobro, which I have here on this fader, and the electric guitar, which I have here on this fader. And I'll fiddle around with them, spotting where those important moments are. So what I want to do in my track section is just zoom to the tracks in question. And having these in my eye line will be helpful, because that will tell me that I don't need to worry about the dobro during this part, because he's not playing there. The electric guitar is kind of less of an issue. You can see that the loud parts here generally is kind of this kind of level when he's playing his rhythmic stuff. And then we get a bit louder when he plays his nice big licks. But we need to check all that. So let's start from the beginning. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a listen here, particularly to the dobro and the electric guitar. I'm going to play with the faders, move them around during the course of the mix. And when I'm happy that I know what I'm going to do, I will then record a pass of automation on those 2 tracks. So let's have a listen and get them to be where we want them to be. I might just turn the fiddle and piano down ever so slightly.
To that fancy restaurant.
Okay, I had a fiddle around. Now then, what I was doing while I was listening to that pass is I was just adjusting slightly the levels of my dobro and electric guitar. to where I thought they needed to be. And then when we came particularly to that second verse, I needed to boost the piano a bit. So I wasn't thinking too much about the piano now, but I needed to put it up to where I thought the piano needed to be so that I could then tell where exactly I wanted my electric guitar fader to be, so I could make that move. So when I come to make this pass now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to record volume automation on my dobro and electric guitar. I am also going to be moving the piano at the same time, but not recording that one. That's going to come later, but it will help me to make sure I get the levels of the other two instruments right. Now, of course, when you're focusing so much on two instruments, it's easy to make them too loud. So all the time I'm still listening to the vocal and making sure I'm not climbing over the vocal and hang on a minute, that guitar is now louder than the vocal. We don't want that. All these things need to be taken into consideration. So how are we going to do this? Like I say, we're not automating the tracks, we are automating the buses. So let's just expand our buses a little here and have a look at our dobro and electric guitar. And what we have here is our automation lane. So if I open that up, you will see a volume envelope appear for each of these tracks, and I'm just going to zoom these a little to make them a little bigger. We don't need the actual track header itself to be as big as that, because we want as much space here for our envelopes. So I'm not going to be playing with these, I'm going to be moving my faders, of course, but you will see on here the automation that is being written. So how do we do this? I choose my bus, so here I have my acoustics bus selected, which is basically the dobro, and then I will turn on my automation. Just zoom in here. So you'll notice these two buttons here, read and write for the automation. And here we have the bus output volume, which is what these green lines represent. So I want to write some automation now. So I'm going to turn on the write buttons for both of these particular tracks. Now I could have done that from over here. As you can see, we have these buttons here. Makes no difference where I do it, whether I do it in track view or in console view, but that's how I do it. So what these now mean is that any movements I now do during the course of this song will be written to these tracks. So before I do this, very important, I want to make sure their initial level is right. I want to make sure they're the right level when they first come in, have that set and ready. I don't want to be kind of fumbling to find that level once we're in. So once I've got these initial levels set, we shall automate. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm happy that that is the level I want. So let's turn these two on. Now we are going to write our automation. I'm going to play through the whole song and I'm going to be moving the faders as and when I think it is necessary. Here we go. Okay, that is my automation rides done on my dobro and electric guitar. Now, does that mean they are set in stone and I got it absolutely right first time? Of course not. What I'm going to do when I've done the same for my piano and fiddle is then we're going to listen through to the results of what I've done automation wise, and then if I missed a bit, if I should have turned the guitar up a bit sooner there, or hang on, maybe I turned that fiddle up a little bit too much at that point, that's when we can come in and we can just edit these particular sections. So I don't do my automation by clicking and drawing here. I do my automation on my faders, but then if I need to make any little edits here and there, then I can come and just do little tweaks here. So let's move to the piano and fiddle and open up the lanes here. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to turn read off here, and you'll notice these R's are this is mean I've turned the write buttons off, the read buttons are on. If they were off, then those levels would be static. As you can see here, these blue symbols means that we are reading automation. So if I was in the console view and I wanted to automate my piano and fiddle, I could, for example, right click on the fader and do that, and the same with that one. Okay, basically the same thing as coming in here and hitting those buttons. Once again, before we start doing anything, I'm going to turn my write off just to make sure that I have the initial levels of these two instruments exactly right. So from the top, let's get these set initial levels.
Now 6 months.
Okay, I have my initial levels set. So once again, we're going to turn on our write buttons to write the automation to these two particular faders. So once again, let's do that and that, and let's record some automation for our piano and our fiddle. Here we go. So join me one more time in part 8 for the final gripping installment of our adventure.